Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the second installation of the MDIC Case for Quality Collaborative Community Forum. Today's portion of the forum focuses on advanced manufacturing, computer software assurance, and the Accelerate Sustainable Capability pilot study. We hope that you enjoyed yesterday's programming, and today we have some additional panels featuring esteemed representatives from both industry and the FDA. These are wonderful groups, and I'm certain that you will find the panels both helpful and informative. Please note that today's panel presentations will be followed by a live Q&A session with each panel. My name is Desiree Steele, and I'm the program manager for the Case for Quality Collaborative Community. Now we will hear from Cisco Vicente and Ravi Nabar on advanced manufacturing.
Hello, my name is Cisco Vicente, and I am here with Ravi Nabar, who is the head of Global QMS and Compliance at Illumina. And I really want to thank MDIC for hosting us and for getting together this collaborative community forum regarding case for quality and giving us the opportunity to really talk about some of the advanced manufacturing efforts that we are going to be engaging in the upcoming years as part of our work moving forward. Ravi, you want to take a moment and introduce a bit more of yourself?
Oh, thank you, Cisco. No, you actually introduced me just fine. I'm very excited to be a part of this this program, and I'm serving on the Case for Quality Executive Steering Committee, and really I'm looking forward to this this initiative in advanced manufacturing with the industry.
All right, so when we talk about advanced manufacturing, what are we really doing and what we're engaging in really takes us and grounds us back into what are we doing here with Case for Quality overall, right? The big picture on Case for Quality, it's always been about improving quality and safety. You know, we've been working to do that in collaboration, right? Engaging patients, payers, providers, industry, bringing everybody together to figure out how do we do and approach our quality activities in a better, more sustainable format. The idea of increasing the focus on quality, moving away from the mindset that compliance is the end goal and the objective, but how do we collectively keep moving the needle on what matters and what practices and what behaviors keep driving quality forward. And lastly, it's the developing and enhancing tools that help us achieve that goal, right? It's not just about the external tools, it's also some of the regulatory tools that we're utilizing in terms of moving the needle forward. So with that, one of our next pieces and discussion points is going to be on our advanced manufacturing efforts and that focus. When we think about advanced manufacturing, we're not just talking about a technology that is on the floor. It's really engaging the people, it's the processes and the technology that's behind it. Our VIP program within the broader collaborative community has been a big part about driving that improvement within the people and the processes, the methods that are involved there. Now we're touching on, okay, how do we use the technology? How do we start enabling technology to be part of that movement and part of that discussion moving forward? You know, if you really drive things in the direction where you're just really very technology focused and the people and the processes aren't there to support it, you tend to really drive a lot more chaos in the system. If you focus a lot on people and processes and at some point in time don't involve the technology and improve along that way, you will plateau on your ability to perform, deliver, and move forward. So from an FDA standpoint, this has been something that we've always treated as two sides of the same coin, and we really have to make sure that our efforts are moving the two in parallel as much as possible. I don't know, Ravi, if you got any thoughts or opinions on that piece.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Cisco. We're entering an age of digital transformation, and certainly with the advent of COVID and catastrophic events like that, the need for digitization and for bringing intelligent automation to improve the efficiency, safety, and quality of our manufacturing processes and ultimately our patients is kind of becoming paramount. And that's what this effort is really targeted towards doing, as you'll see in the next few slides that we present.
So, why advanced manufacturing? Why is that something that we're taking on? There's a lot of work that's been ongoing, but foundationally, it's always been part of the broader objective and goal. But it really is a tool, a system. It's a way of looking at things that does improve quality and safety for patients. From a FDA, and this is my own personal, very selfish reason, it does improve our resources, right? The effectiveness of them. What can we do with it? How do we broaden the impact around that portion? And then I think, at least increasingly important, and this is something that we've seen a lot, even with the current COVID-19 pandemic that's going out there, the ability for manufacturers to increase their capacity, that flexibility, to shift production, improve value. It's a reason why we're thinking the technology, the digitalization that it enables is something that we are looking to help support and drive the, any facility in terms of adopting and moving forward on. The idea that for patients, we're looking at improved design quality, improved risk management for the product. There's huge benefits that come from that digital linkage there. FDA, from our standpoint, it's more data to really drive some of the analysis, the analytics, more informed risk-based decisions that we can collectively make. And for manufacturers, and we've seen and heard this, it happens in a lot of other industries, it's faster introduction of new products, it's faster change approvals, increased collaboration with the regulator. Who thought that would happen? We are here trying to really come together and make sure that as a community, we are able to deliver what is the best outcome for patients. And this is one of the building blocks along that path. So what are some of the things that the agency is doing right now to really move the needle or at least get the process started? First, it's our work and efforts on our software assurance guidance development. And that really is intended to help clear some of the hurdles that we heard and some of the barriers that we really encountered. And you'll hear more about that CSA effort in other portions of the discussion here, the collaborative community. But it is geared towards moving the needle and making it easier to make the technology part of the solution and make it adopted throughout the industry in an easier format. Understanding what the state of the industry is, especially in comparison to some of the other industries that are applying these technologies and where the barriers are. And MDIC is leading a lot of the efforts on that landscape analysis. The FDA is looking to develop an independent clearinghouse for these advanced manufacturing technologies. An organization that is external, that is agile enough to work collectively and collaboratively with us as an agency and with our industry partners or any other stakeholders involved along the way to come up with the right solutions and deliver a way to get that broadly applied across the industry quickly. And then something that I'll talk about a little bit beforehand is our current ventilator digital twin project, which is part of us as an agency proving this concept out and building putting together the building blocks that are needed to support that manufacturing clearinghouse. So to that end, part of the reason we started the digital twin work, and it's really foundational, is the idea of digitizing that whole advanced design activities and manufacturing efforts, bringing together that data into a very closed loop type of environment that helps feed each other with what's really happening in the real world and supported by real world data. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robbie to give a little bit more detail on what that means and what that looks like.
Oh, that was a really, really insightful introduction. Thank you, Cisco. And I'm really glad that I've been involved with Case for Quality since about 2012, and this has evolved into really a really interesting notion that as Cisco described, digital twin, and associated with that, the notion of digital thread. Now, at Illumina, where we do a lot of work with gene sequencing and apply that towards diagnostic assays to further patient outcomes and diagnostics. related to genetic diseases. We have basically taken a factory of the future automation approach, which is an organization within our company, and partnered very heavily with the quality organization to drive improvements. And the first insight that we get from what Cisco just said and how we are looking at it as well is that the digital twin concept arises in design. Now, we're all familiar with the notion of quality by design, and we have already gone digital in many respects with respect to the product lifecycle systems and the platforms that support those. But what we've done here is then expanded that notion to actually transfer from digital design in terms of the blue box that we've attempted to show on this slide, which obviously begins with design controls as we classically define them in the context of the voice of the customer, the requirements from the customer, and that then translate classically into the deployment of the house of quality across design inputs, design reviews, verification, validation, and outputs, as well as design changes and design transfers. So that whole blue box, that is a set of activities that are conducted by the design authority or the design owner, have been done classically using tools that are called, often referred to as product lifecycle management tools, or PLM, as we call them. The notion of digital twin is that whereas in the classical sense, we would then do a design transfer into manufacturing, and that's a discrete set of activities, as we all know, that then results in a device master record that kind of tells us how to build a product. What the digital twin notion does then is it actually creates efficiencies in not only the creation of the digital product, along with all the requirements and the inputs and the activities that go with that, but then actually mirrors that digitally into the manufacturing realm. And many of us use manufacturing execution systems. We at Illumina, for example, use the Siemens CAMSTAR system. And we do use also the product lifecycle management system, which is the front end of that, called Team Center. So the notion here is that if we can integrate those two, we can digitally transfer the design into manufacturing with a certain degree of automation. And what that helps us do by way of design transfer then is build in efficiencies that ensure that we'll be able to conduct those transfers in a seamless way and enhance the quality of the transfer. And this then translates into the notion that this impacts the design transfer, the line setup parameters, the establishment of and commissioning of equipment that's needed, and the initialization of that, as well as the actual operation of that within the manufacturing execution system, leading to a record that we often refer to as the batch record of the device history record in medical device and in vitro diagnostic terms. Now, how does that really affect quality? Well, at the very sort of outset of this, and you'll see that at the bottom of the slide, we've attempted to show the aspects of data governance in very broad terms, and validation, or as Cisco mentioned, computer systems assurance, which is the direction in which we're going. So what that does then is it kind of brings in the efficiencies from the perspective of the validations, and as well as the governance of the master data that reside within the PLM systems. And this translates into master data that is then specified as critical components management, as well as the FMEAs that are created on the left side in design, or failure modes and effect analyses. That then transfer to the right side in terms of the process FMEAs, and then the critical parameters associated with those FMEAs are then captured within the systems in an integrated sense, from the standpoint of not only the digital drawings and the CAD drawings that apply to the product, but also then to the manufacturing processes that are then qualified and validated to build the product with those critical parameters that drive the quality of the output that those manufacturing processes produce. So what that then leads us to do is build out an analytics and artificial intelligence engine. I want to use that term because it's really a set of APIs and a set of routines that then call upon queries into the systems at either end to pull data that would typically then translate into metrics and dashboards that would dictate the quality of the product. For example, how well are we doing on non-conformances within the manufacturing realm? Are there any, what's the cost of quality going to be, or the cost of poor quality from items that were non-conformant? And this leads into our tie-in to other systems that we use in quality to track important things such as CAPA, such as complaints, and then create a feedback loop then that goes back digitally into the design aspect or into the manufacturing aspect. Now, Cisco referred to risk management, and what this also enables then is kind of a real-time sort of a update of the files pertaining to the product risk files, because now you've got essentially dynamic inputs that go from manufacturing and manufacturing defects back into design, where the case may be, or from the post-market side, which I've not shown on this particular slide, but which we also actually have as a discrete set of activities relating to post-market surveillance and vigilance. So I just wanted to quickly invite Cisco to have any additional comments on this before I kind of just speak very briefly to the next set of related activities that also are part of the digital twin and the digital thread perspective. Cisco, any thoughts you would like to share?
No, so I think actually that was a great way to outline not just the concept of the digital twin, but that it's really not about just the traditional development of a model around these things, right? But the idea here that it is about turning that into a truly data represented version of what's actually going to be the product on the road, with all the connection points throughout the life cycle, right? Because that's really where the impact and the value is. It's in that flow of information and then that closing of the loop. I think that from an FDA standpoint is truly the ideal representation of even what we talk about within regards to the quality system and all the regulations, right? It's that closed loop feedback mechanism. This just enables that to happen in much more controlled and faster fashion.
Thank you. Yes, Cisco, that's so true. And then, there's some additional aspects that I had mentioned that relate to modeling. And the reason that becomes so important is that in COVID times, for example, we're all reconsidering how to lay out our factories from the perspective of social distancing and yet maintaining good throughput, good efficiencies of manufacturing in this new environment. And so the modeling aspect of this then really translates to being able to generate models that'll help us scale our factories and also scale us to the environment, whether it's in terms of increased demand in some cases where we're manufacturing, for example, things that are under emergency use authorization that have very high demand and still require a great deal of throughput, but yet need to be manufactured in an environment that's truly a social distancing COVID environment. So the kind of plant simulation activities also let us then do a better, more efficient job of determining plant loading, determine the proper placement of equipment, the proper placement of people, and actually having a more efficient way of actually going about the manufacturing process. So it's not only the quality, but also the efficiencies that are driven through this from the perspective of digitization. And so that's a real benefit. And the other thing is we don't look at this as a one-time thing. This is a living thing. It's not as if we do the simulation and the modeling, at one point determine a plant layout and then archive it, because what it is, as Cisco said, it's a closed loop system. So we're constantly looking at how this real-time environment is impacting us. And so, for example, we're also thinking about how we would link into the supply chain, for example, from a logistics perspective, including concepts such as blockchain technology, which I've not really mentioned here, but really from the perspective of getting efficiencies, even as far as inventory management and incoming quality assurance is concerned, because we know there's a huge impact of supply chain on quality. And so we're also attempting to digitize that so that we can build efficiencies into the supply chain as it enters the factory. And then from there on, take it through to the manufacturing execution system with the digital thread that would then tie back to any non-conformances that come out of either supplier or through in-factory processes, and then tie that back to whether it's a manufacturing defect or whether there is an opportunity to improve design. And then the other aspect of this is that as we actually launch the product and put it in the market, there's real-time data that's received by the other end, which is the, in our case, the Salesforce.com platform, and there are many other platforms, I'm sure, but then we set up systems that will then integrate and link the data that we get back into those systems back into manufacturing and back into design, thereby closing the loop that Cisco referred to, and then being able to do a really nice job of managing risk in a digital environment, so that we're more dynamic and more real time in terms of our management of that risk. Cisco, any concluding remarks on this slide?
No, thanks. I think that covered it really well.
Thank you.
I do appreciate a lot of what Robbie had brought up, even in some of his examples, because they lead us right to what we're trying to do internally at FDA with the digital twin work that we've engaged with on a ventilator. The idea of, building out a medical device throughout the full life cycle was something that, really came about because of the unfortunate pandemic situation going on right now, but it has allowed us to do a lot of learning and really trying to take this entire ventilator, this entire digital twin concept, apply it throughout the product and find out how we can use this, not just to address current pandemic situations, scenarios that are, inherent in what's happening now within the industry, but how can we use this to help transform down the road the way we approach work and the interaction between the regulator and the industry? But our current work right now, and it really is geared towards driving that digitalization aspect, because that is foundational to a lot of the advanced manufacturing efforts and work, but also to put together a proof of concept of what this advanced manufacturing clearinghouse may look like, right? So within the work that's ongoing right now, we've partnered with Siemens to really work on, developing these models and using them in simulation throughout design, considering what that means for additive manufacturing, generative design, and what impact that may have within our current regulatory approaches. The digital design transfer Ravi mentioned, and the ability to take some of that data and utilize it more collectively to tackle bigger issues like supply chain problems. The production simulation portion, that is been huge in terms of being able to optimize the production right now and demonstrate that can be done in a very fast and rapid fashion using the simulation. And then finally, the idea of building out that closed loop quality within that whole digital structure. Because as Robin mentioned, with the rapid changes that are even happening right now, the degree of production that needs to be happening with some of the current medical devices or the testing equipment that's out there that's needed, you really do need to have the capability to trace back. There's still the responsibility of keeping at least an understanding of what's happening from a risk standpoint of the products that are in the field. And this idea of a closed loop quality system helps really enable that in a seamless fashion without adding a lot of extra burden to the industry or to the process. So we've been working on this for a little bit of time now, and our goal really is to be able to take some of the challenges that we heard were being faced by the industry from the COVID-19 state and show some distinct applications of how having this entire digital thread and this digital connection would help alleviate some of that concern, make it easier, make it faster, make it more cost effective, and actually deliver a better product down the road. we would like collectively to work with Siemens to deliver some of the white papers or playbook for industry that shows how this can be done. But the big piece of this, and also part of what we'd like to do from the Advanced Manufacturing Clearinghouse standpoint, is do we encounter or identify any regulatory barriers along the way that we as an agency need to help clear in order to make this technology and this approach and this methodology more easy to adopt and implement within the med device industry. So that's where we are, and that's part of our internal learning and what we're trying to gauge at. But I think just to really close the loop where we started from and where we are in case for quality, the idea of the work that we're doing and what one try to engage in from any advanced manufacturing standpoint is, again, tied back to that improving quality and safety. Right now, and you heard it from Robbie also beforehand, we're talking about better data and analytics, right, to inform that risk management, better risk-based decision-making, not just in the industry, but with FDA and other stakeholders. The improved design optimization, automation around that piece, I like that message that Robbie gave on the integrated risk management or the updated risk management, that living risk file that becomes part of your design and your design optimization. Optimization on automation and more control within the production supply chain. And I think the piece of the equation that we contribute the most in is really that idea of innovating within our regulatory processes, right? The whole system, the engagement. How do we do things differently to make sure that there's the value gained from the adoption of these technologies as we move forward? And that's part of what we're here for. And again, in typical fashion with a lot of everything we're doing with case of quality, we're trying to do this in a collaborative effort. We want to make sure we're engaged. We want to make sure we're partnering and making sure that this will deliver value to not just the industry participants, but in goal down the line to the patients and the users who need these medical technologies down the road. And I think with that, I want to thank Robbie for his time and his contribution, participation here. I want to thank MDIC for the opportunity to present here and for hosting the session. And with that, I think I am good. Robbie, I don't know if you got any other closing remarks.
Oh, I really appreciate the collaborative environment that is created also within a safe space. And I think Cisco made some really powerful points here about innovation, not only in manufacturing, but also in associated regulatory processes. And so, for example, some of the work we are doing with VIP and the submissions and the accelerated submissions actually will translate into the digital environment where we can have submissions that are then eventually examined, hopefully, at a digital level, such as plant layouts, such as certain line setups, and even some of the real-time data for manufacturing in a safe and collaborative environment. So what Cisco is talking about really is a real revolutionizing, future-looking, looking at the digital environment and the power of technology to bring about really good patient safety and better quality and regulatory processes. So thank you. Really exciting developments in this field.
Thank you, everybody, once again, and have a good day and stay safe.
Hi, my name's Jason Spiegler with Siemens, and we're very excited for the opportunity to talk with you about computer software assurance and the CSA activity from this team. Again, I'm the Senior Director for Strategic Initiatives with Siemens. And Ken, I'll have you and Cisco. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, Ken Shitomoto from Gilead Sciences. I head up IT quality engineering, which handles validation, qualification, and software testing.
Hi, I'm Cisco Vicenti. I'm our program manager for our case of quality efforts in the Office of Product Evaluation Quality with CDRH.
Great. So we're really excited to speak with you about this topic. It's very foundational for unleashing digitalization in many of the initiatives taking place across the medical device diagnostics and even holistically the life sciences industry. Today, I'm going to start by giving you some of the background of how the team was formed and how the initiative kicked off. Ken is then going to walk you through really the meat and get into the what, the how, and really what's the value. And we have many examples. Ken's going to share a great example with you. And then we're going to end with Cisco walking you through, well, how does this align with a lot of the FDA initiatives and MDIC initiatives? And what is the FDA's perspective on the topic? So one of the roles I have within Siemens, I organize a lot of events working with many of our strategic customers. And in particular, about 5 years ago, Fresenius Medical Care agreed to host an executive roundtable for us. And again, going back 5 years ago, there were not a lot of manufacturers that were openly inviting the FDA to come and participate in events that they were hosting at their sites. But I give Bill D'Ancenzo, the Senior VP of Digital Integration at Fresenius, a lot of credit, because when I asked, this is about case for quality and stakeholder engagement, is it okay for Cisco to join? He said, sure. And so Bill gave this presentation. We had about a dozen executives in the room from different companies, different functions, IT, operations, manufacturing, quality. And after Bill was done speaking on the topic on the screen, I asked the group, for your technology investments, what are the biggest barriers holding you back from realizing value? And for an hour and a half, the executives debated, but really focused in on this topic of computer system validation. And I was really surprised at the amount of passion in terms of this being such a major barrier. And many of the different challenges that I'm sure many of the medical device manufacturers encounter were brought up. And just to pick a few, I mean, that one right there about validating all software the same way, that was something we heard a lot, that irrespective of whether it was a learning management system or software that you were using, let's say in a device like a pacemaker, it didn't matter. There was really no rhyme or reason around critical thinking or risk-based approach. It was validated the same way. I love the quote, we are risk-based, everything's considered high risk, right? We heard that a lot. In terms of the amount of documentation, that was really the biggest barrier. They just didn't seem to think there was a lot of value given the amount of documentation. And many of the documentation, or many of the errors that would occur during CSV were not software bugs. They were actually issues and deviations related to the documentation. And so when you start to think about, well, what's the impact of all these issues? So number one, the manufacturers become very reluctant to invest in technology. In particular, remember an example of a multi-billion-dollar company that was looking at very inexpensive BI software, but they decided the validation burden was going to be too high to purchase it. Or when those manufacturers do invest in technologies, the documentation burden is excessive, and the testing and the documentation is not commensurate with the risk. And then you layer in the cybersecurity issues and the speed that's now required to put patches in, or when you're upgrading. Again, it's significant impact here. And it's not just within medical devices, of course, as you'll hear from Ken. I mean, this really does impact all the different centers within the FDA. So coming out of that event, I reached out to a number of executives I knew, and I basically said, give me your most creative and innovative people that really like to challenge the status quo and also happen to be subject matter experts in computer system validation. And we've assembled a phenomenal team that's, I think, very representative of small companies, large companies, cross-segment. We've even begun to include biopharma companies like Gilead Sciences. And again, you'll hear from Ken in a minute. So it's just been a fantastic team over the last 5 years. And so with that, I'm gonna transition it over to Ken.
Okay, well, hey, thank you, Jason. I'm going to cover the what, the how, and the value. So this is the crux of it at the highest level. If you look at this slide, you cover from document-centric versus critical thinking-centric approaches to validation. And if you look at the triangle on the, well, pyramid on the left, you see that what we historically have done is we've de-emphasized the critical thinking. As a consequence, our insurance needs increase and our testing activities increase and our documentation burden increase. In which case, in this paradigm, quality becomes second to documentation, right? Everything we do is because we don't apply our critical thinking hat and really look at the emphasis, as Jason was alluding to earlier, that we do a one-size-fits-all approach, we end up with more documentation we need. And if you look at CSA, it flips that over and you focus on, again, quality is more important than documentation. You apply critical thinking, your assurance needs reduces, your testing activities, you look, it's about the same, except the emphasis is different. The emphasis is not on capturing the screenshots. There are no predicate rules that mandate the use of screenshots even. And your documentation burden goes down. Think of it this way. You can't test everything, therefore we do risk-based testing. And then what CSA adds an overlay is risk-based documentation, right? Document the critical aspects. If you think about it during an inspection, you're never going to pull out and say, someone say like, show me the testing for a low risk requirement. The emphasis is always going to be high. So there's already inherent to our business process, an emphasis on risk and risk-based documentation. Right? So one of the reasons why we're in this position, I want to get out, it's easy to be conservative because there's no critical thinking involved. It's easy to just say, I will keep generating more and more screenshots. Right? And what CSA is doing is really taking that step back and applying critical thinking. Should I be testing this or not? If we go to the next slide, one of the things that we're really moving forward is a partnership with GAMP that the CSA is really pushed forward. If you look here, this is risk-based test rigor, and this comes from GAMP. If you look at M3, and it's your standard severity versus probability, generates a risk class. The risk class then is mapped with detectability, and you get a level of testing. That's detectability before harm occurs, not after. And one of the problems here and why GAMP and CSA are really aligned is this actually sits there. This is one dimension. How much should I test? And one of the problems with this model, if you talk within our partnership with GAMP, is we uncovered that this actually dissuades critical thinking because it ends up that people were applying a plug and chug approach to validation, and they would look at this table and they would drive it. So when we partnered with GAMP, right, and one of the areas where GAMP and we're able to partner with is that it's a life cycle approach. So really looking at GAMP as a life cycle, and within that life cycle, CSA advocates the use of the entire life cycle throughout. One of the things here, again, you have your table of risk, and what you look here, it's actually now it's a gradient. It's kind of like the anti-table. It's the anti, show me a table, turn off my rain, and determine how much testing should I do. If you look at this, it's not even saying that for a high risk area that you must do a certain type of testing. All it is saying here is that the level of documentation increases the higher the risk is. And what are some examples of assurance approaches? Here on this slide, we have the various testing approaches. We have the concept of basic assurance. That is basically what the vendor has already done. You determine that during an audit. Then you have ad hoc testing. Ad hoc testing, as it sounds, it's just testing without a script, going, challenging the system, and exploring it. You have unscripted testing. Unscripted testing is then another form. It's a level above ad hoc. We would call here exploratory testing, where you basically document the scenarios that you're going to cover. You identify them, you go through, and as you keep a log of the areas that you covered, and it's a dynamic testing that changes as you go through it. And we do have examples in the appendix of all of these kind of spelled out. The next level above, as implied, is limited scripted, right, where you have some guidance and direction, not the step-by-step. And then you have the robust scripted at the highest level, where you have the detailed test cases that you're all familiar with, and most people do. Right? Now, one of the things in the partnership is this is now CSA is now in GAMP. And if you look at Part 11 scope and application, where does it point to for further guidance and validation? points to GAMP, and it points to general principles of software validation. And as I alluded to with the gradient, one of the things that's referenced in this document is the fact that you can test a high-risk requirement with only exploratory testing. That you would do multiple scenarios on that, and a collection of exploratory test cases can give you that same level of assurance. Essentially, these are all various options that are available to you, and you need to use the risks to determine what will give you the level of assurance that you need, right? That the system is actually working and meeting. One of the things I would like to emphasize is the unscripted testing. If you go to a testing conference and you ask the room, what is the best way of testing? Hands up consistently, it's exploratory testing, because it is a dynamic testing. As you test, you adjust your testing approach, as opposed to what we do in static scripts, which basically you execute and you never adjust. So it never really gets there. In fact, if you look at it, what CSA opens the door to is modern testing. It allows you to use testing techniques that have moved forward since the concepts of validations, originated. And they include automation, they include exploratory testing, and a whole slew of other techniques. And it's not about less testing. I just want to keep emphasizing it. It's about more testing. Once you start taking the screenshots away, you have more time to do more testing. In fact, the way that we currently test systems, we exercise a test case until it has no value. A test case only has value when it actually has the possibility of detecting an error. And that is key, right? It's not about the screenshot that is good for patient safety, product quality, data integrity, public health in general. It's about the detection and removal of defects. That is the emphasis, and that's what CSA enables you to do. Now, before I go further, I want to give you kind of a couple more things. And this slide is broken down in the appendix as well, so you can look at the various details. If you look first at the first lever that you can pull, it's the magnifying lens. And that's basically what we said earlier, basic assurance. It's going, if my vendor's already tested it, I can leverage their testing, right? I'm going to go look at the vendor. One of the things that even in the GAMP guide that we emphasize, it's not about, say, testing to GXP documentation standards, right? It is really about, does their software engineering practices produce high quality software? Because if you look at modern testing approaches, you look at continuous delivery and other things, it's a very different paradigm that we've entered. And we're acknowledging that there are different ways of achieving quality. If you really look, the fallacy that we seem to imply when we do our audits is we say they should test the way that we do. And the way that we test is actually based on software engineering practices from 1993. Okay, and other things you can do is ISO certifications, I think. The next thing over the clock, that is to leverage activities that you've already performed. So when you're actually implementing a system, you typically do have some testing that's done. And you can leverage that to reduce it. In our case at Gilead, we have a software testing organization. And part of our process, we actually go in and we test the systems to ensure that they are fit for, well, that they're to remove defects, because that is the purpose of testing, right? It's the detection and removal of defects. So you can make a risk-based determination on whether you should move forward or not. The next one is the 2 gears. That represents automation. That is something that we've done. We've moved forward with automation. There's regression automation to basically test critical business functionality after changes have occurred that are used. So actually we use automation to actually deploy systems programmatically such that concepts such as like a build verification or a /IQ no longer need to occur because they've been programmatically deterministically deployed. You have that consistency. I pointed at an environment, the script runs, it's deployed the same way. Doesn't matter which environment I pointed at. So therefore, I don't need a human to go back and verify it. So I eliminate the whole business process of an IQ or build verification, right? And then the last point is that there are other ways to ensure that you are in a state of control. And that's really looking at your metrics, right? That is basically looking at the system and whether it's monitoring it, whether it's looking at defects to show that I'm in a state of control, as opposed to doing that. What we have done is we've released systems, we hook them into a framework, and it constantly monitors them to make sure that the system is in a state of control within the operating parameters, as opposed to doing point-in-time qualification efforts. Now, one of the things I want to now kind of weave it together in an example that to try to wrap it. And the example I'm going to give is it's a car. I'm going to go buy a car. And first level of the car, it's like the basic assurance. I have a Ford, I have a BMW, I have a Honda, I have, consumer reports I can look at. I have National Highway Institute metrics. I could see even magazine ads that advocate those things. That's my basic assurance. Now the ad hoc testing, that's me getting behind the wheel, taking the car out and driving it. I very much, it's up to me. I have my parameters. I'm going to accelerate. I'm going to go, if anyone's running with me, I like to take the corners and I like to go fast and other things and test the brakes. The unscripted testing. And now this is how, remember, this is where you have, it's still a dynamic based testing, but without necessarily the rigor of a script. So this would be giving it to my mechanic and say, hey, I want you to give me a once over. He takes it out for a test drive, checks it out using his expert judgment to ensure that that car is still working. Then you have on top of that the limited scripted. So if you look at the limited scripted in this context, this is basically, again, going with the mechanic, and he generates a report saying that, hey, not only did this, I checked the battery, I checked the fluids, I did all the brakes, et cetera, and I did my test drive. The robust scripted, this is where they still do it, but now they have formal protocols. This is typically done by the dealership when they have the certified used car, right? That they've done the 101 point inspection to their standards, therefore they can give you the extra 5-year warranty. So these are all different levers that you can pull when you're buying the car. Now, one of the things is it's any combination of these, right? It's possible. I don't need to do one or the other. I could do the ad hoc on top. And the key thing here is, in this example, goes back to even critical requirements. I can use other methodologies, right? If the car, right? We do this intrinsically, like safety. I don't take the car and slam it into the wall to make sure that the airbags deploy, that I'm safe. Instead, I'm relying on basic assurance. I'm remembering that it has a 5-star safety rating, that I do not need to actually do that. Fuel economy. I usually don't drive the car for a week and drive it around and then objectively measure fuel economy, which was also typically a critical requirement. No, instead, I go off and I look at the reports. We can bring in automation. We can bring in a Carfax report in here. We can bring in the OBD2, the onboard diagnostics, when the mechanic hooks in the computer into your car to look at the readings. We can use that as well. There's automation available. And the last thing, we have metrics, consumer reports, constantly year over year, measures the performance of that vehicle. And I could say like, hey, that's a car worth doing. So here we apply critical thinking. What we're advocating at CSA is now using that same sort of critical thinking and applying it to your test cycle. All right, so, and the last thing on the value, I know everyone's going to jump to that. Over 20 million in cost avoidance from all techniques. So cost avoidance, meaning that soft savings, that I don't need to spend the money. For example, we're about to do our aggregation project, and we took out right now we're still finalizing numbers. It will be between $5 and $9 million taken out of that project budget for validation for the entire program. That we did our ERP upgrade, and using a variety of techniques, we were able to reduce that by $12 million. And you look at automation, our savings, cumulative savings is over 2 million in automation. So there are real tangible savings that can be achieved by using these techniques, right? And if you look in that upper left corner, and this is where, we built models and we did a retrospective analysis to show that if we applied these techniques, that there would be no detriment to quality. That's your starting point. That's the point we want all of you to take and move forward with. And then the last points, these are very significant: leverage SQA. Again, using your existing cycles eliminates redundant testing, continuous control, as I alluded to, monitoring the system and automation and digital validation. That's going paperless. That number of 30% functional testing costs, that came from my vendor. So you know it's actually probably higher than that, but they give me the 30% savings. With that, we'll move to Cisco.
Thank you for that, Ken. And now just to give some perspectives on our end, because I think one of the pieces of all this puzzle that we always get asked about is, well, what does FDA think? You know, what about this approach is? Does this make sense? Or, you know, what about all the documentary requirements or the regulatory requirements around documentation? Well, I think the first thing I'd like to highlight, and using this as an example, because it's something that we as a agency kind of came through and crafted to demonstrate the principle. You know, none of this and nothing that was stated or said beforehand, first of all, is not anything that's outside the regulations or not within the scope of something that we voiced before from a policy standpoint. Additionally to that, and I think Ken alluded to it, this does not mean no documentation. That's not the case here. What we're talking about is let's make that documentation valuable, relevant, and as effective and efficient as possible, along with enabling organizations to use other methods and practices, test activities that are more relevant to really getting to the heart of the issue and the risk that's involved with the implementation of technology. You know, this spreadsheet example is a great one to really highlight that, right? This is not a complicated process. It's what is your intended use? You know, what are you looking to do with that? What's the risk assessment around that, right? What is that really doing, not to the end user patient, but where it's intended to be used, right? What are the chances that if that fails, it's going to cause some other harm or hazardous situation? You know, what was tested? The type of testing that was done, what were you looking to get out of that testing, when, who did it, the activities that they undertook or the objectives that they went, especially if you're using an ad hoc or unscripted type of exploratory testing. And then what were your conclusions? Did you observe errors? What would you disposition with them? Did you disposition them, or if no errors are observed, move on? What was the determination for yourself? This is all that we really need. This doesn't have to take a lot of effort and a lot of time. And again, this is something that internally, even some of our experts put together and kind of demonstrated. This is really all we are looking for. Why are we looking to do that? I think Ken mentioned it. You know, Jason really spoke to it in the very beginning. Automation. It is something that, from an agency standpoint, we encourage. We want organizations using this. It is part of some of the other efforts that we are undertaking under a case for quality. Is the foundational part of what we're trying to do. There is potential for better information, eliminating data, increasing speed. In the case of what's going on right now with COVID, better resilience, flexibility in what you are able to do. It does effectively reduce risk. And the benefits of the automation technology is something that really does outweigh some of the risks I think we've been talking about or people have been concerned with up until this point in time. What are we trying to do from an agency standpoint to support the transition? We've got, you know, the idea of drafting, and we put together a guidance internally that highlights these principles, these ideas, and the idea and the acceptance that, yes, a risk-based approach has been something we've always intended and tried to allude to beforehand, but maybe not with the right amount of clarity that was needed. So that is something that is on our A list and we are actively working on for release. It has been impacted by the current COVID issues and the agency shift of resources in order to help support a lot of the emergency use authorizations. But, you know, the team here and others have been engaged and involved, have been actively getting out there and trying to convey the message. MDIC has supported and will be supporting more collaboration with the team to really move the needle on CSA, to provide more of that detail understanding examples on how to get this done and do it within the standpoint of a compliant activity. In support of more of the technology adoption, we've been working with MDIC on their contract to really analyze the state of technology use across the med device industry so we can figure out how much more is needed. What are the barriers that we're encountering? Because as Jason alluded to, this was a surprise to us in the very beginning that this was such a barrier. It's not feedback we'd received up until that point in time. And then the other piece of this is the idea of establishing an independent clearinghouse for some of these technologies and the need for speed and I guess fast adoption to the current practices and state of thinking is really critical for the pace that technology is really changing and evolving at right now, and Jason alluded to that. So having a independent structure that the agency can also engage with and participate on that will help keep up to date on that shift and has that speed and agility to be able to really help out collectively the med device industry is a foundational portion of what we want to drive moving forward. Goes back to the idea of why do we want to do this, right? What is it that we are looking to get out of this from an agency standpoint? I mean, it really is that advanced manufacturing focus that we've alluded to. It's the idea of increasing that connectedness and that data flow across the whole total product life cycle. From our standpoint, more analytics, better design, improved risk management, that's all foundational stuff that the agency really is driving and cares about. And it does make your product better and your organization more agile in that sense. Optimizing and digitizing that whole control structure, everything from the inception design all the way down to what's happening to the product in the field right now and that data that flows in between them so that there are better and more effective ways of utilizing the information, that evidence, and focusing on the quality aspect of it, not is it necessarily in compliance. If all of this is done right, compliance is the outcome. It really is just something that happens from that standpoint. And all of this is always moving to that goal, right? And who are we doing this for? It's that patient, that user. It's really about making things better, making the products better for that, I think, constituent that we all collectively are trying to serve, whether you are in medical devices, whether you're pharma, whether it's FDA. We all are aligned and driving towards the same goal and same mission. So how do we enable that to happen? And that's really where all of this work within CSA was founded, where all the people who came together really are continuing committed to really driving forward. And it is part of what will support a lot of the other changes and efforts that the agency is trying to be a part of and to really innovate around. And with that, I want to thank everybody for the time and the willingness to listen in, and thank MDIC for putting this all together. And I will turn it over back to Jason to close us out. Jason.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Cisco, and thanks, Ken. And for all of those that are watching this, we appreciate your time and look forward to helping to support in the adoption of CSA. It is a very exciting initiative, and as you've heard, a lot of opportunity here to foundationally unleash digitalization across the industry.
Thank you for joining us online for the MDIC Case for Quality Forum. And in this session, we will be providing you an overview of the Accelerate Sustainable Capability Pilot Study, also known as the ASC Pilot Study. So my name is Catherine Merrill. I'm a Global Quality and Regulatory Program Director at Medtronic, but also on behalf of MDIC, I'm acting as the program chair for this pilot study. But before we began this session, what I did want to do was acknowledge the very engaged and experienced group that we have, the working group that's ongoing. We have members from ISACA, from Management Control, from FDA, both in CDRH and ORA, as well as industry members like Zimmer Biomet, Baxter, and Medtronic. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we definitely wouldn't be where we are today without the very dedicated efforts of this team. So during this presentation, I will provide you with a high-level overview of the pilot study. And I also wanted to point out that if you want additional details about the pilot study, we have created an ASC pilot study webinar that goes into the details of the creation of the pilot study, as well as you'll hear from some key stakeholders that will explain in deeper detail the elements of the program. And so we encourage you to take a look at that. There's also a detailed participant playbook that'll give you a great idea of what to expect as a pilot site, as well as a frequently asked questions document. You can also find a high-level summary on the FDA website as well. So once I walk through the overview, you'll get to hear from Bleda Vinici, who's the Case for Quality team lead at CDRH at FDA, who will talk about the FDA's perspective of the pilot. I'll also provide a high-level perspective from industry's point of view, some key themes where we believe that the pilot study will benefit both industry and FDA. And then I'll hand it off to Holly Sepinen, the quality director at Zimmer Biomet, who has joined and enrolled in the program. And so she'll be able to share about her experience in enrollment. And then I'll close out this session explaining ways that you can engage in the pilot if you're interested. So before I get into the detailed overview, I did want to re-emphasize the main purpose of the Accelerate Sustainable Capability pilot study, and that is to facilitate a partnership between MDIC, FDA, and industry to really create an improvement pilot. And the goal of the pilot is to help sites address compliance issues and improve product quality both at the same time. So the reason why FDA and MDIC are partnering with industry is that FDA has determined that a singular focus on compliance has not yet resulted in an equivalent year-over-year increase in product quality in the field. And they know through the voluntary improvement program that the CMMI appraisal process is already encouraging continuous improvement above and beyond compliance for sites that without compliance concerns. So the real question is, why not leverage what we've learned as a part of that program to help sites that are focusing on achieving higher levels of compliance? So as a part of the working group, we have multiple members of industry, and you'll see some quotes from a number of our working group members. I know at Medtronic, we've had valuable experience with the voluntary improvement program, and this looks like an opportunity also to partner with FDA and identify ways to improve, especially for sites that are maturing. And from Zimmer Biomet, who you'll hear from later in this presentation, they've indicated they're fully committed to the highest standards of patient safety and quality as a core guiding principle, and they don't want to miss out on the opportunity to enhance their quality system with the Case for Quality ASC pilot tools to ensure their quality and compliance improvements would have long-lasting and continuous and be continuous for the patients. So as we dig into the pilot study overview, I know some of you have seen the webinar, but for those of you who are new to the program, this is intended to give you a high-level overview. It's not going to answer all your questions, but I will put you in contact with the contact points and the website links that you'll need at the end of this presentation. So from the program summary point of view, the pilot study leverages, like I said earlier, lessons learned from the VIP and modifies its use for sites that have identified compliance concerns for themselves, or they're under a compliance action. at this time. So the goal of the pilot study is to test a methodology for providing systemic improvement to enable compliance actions to be closed faster and more sustainably, while at the same time we want to ensure objective metrics and residual risk assessments are in place to give the FDA oversight of product quality throughout the process. So that's a lot of words. So the next thing I wanted to do was to explain the main elements that make up that intention of the pilot. So there's 7 of these. The first one is there's an 18-month pilot study. It starts once your initial CMMI appraisal is completed at your site. Next, there's the CMMI appraisal itself, which is similar to the VIP, if you guys are familiar with the VIP program, except for the scoping for the appraisal will be targeted at those processes that were impacted or affected by the identified compliance concern. The third one is a quarterly residual risk assessment will be completed using publicly available mod data. And what we'll be doing is using a residual risk tool from a company called Management Control. And this risk tool will help prioritize improvements at a site, which I'll explain in a second. But this is new for those of you who are in VIP. This is something that's new, that's a part of the ASC pilot. So there's also going to be quarterly report outs of improvement progress to CMMI. So this is similar to VIP, as well as a quarterly report of the performance metrics to the FDA. And these performance metrics will be aligned with those processes that are affected by the compliance action or opportunity that's been identified. So also throughout the pilot, there will be regular collection of lessons learned. It's going to be done in the format of meetings, lessons learned collection, as well as surveys. And so we're doing that to be able to feed the information in to strengthen the pilot and to help inform any actions that happen after the pilot study. The last thing is if the FDA must do a re-inspection at the site, if it's applicable for the site and it's on the work plan, then they will complete it, but it will be done for 2 purposes. One, it will be done to identify or assess the typical things that they would be looking for as part of that re-inspection, but we'll also use it as a data point to help us determine the effectiveness of the pilot. So again, for all of these elements, if you're familiar with VIP, think of them as something that's very similar, but again, it's targeted to those areas that are associated with the compliance action. So the benefits that we are expecting to see at an actual pilot site is we expect them to benefit from the organizational excellence improvement opportunities that are identified by the CMMI appraisal, with the goal to help them sustain their compliance gap closures and also to improve product quality at the same time. The second benefit we expect, I alluded to earlier, and that would be around the ability of the residual risk tool to potentially help a site prioritize those improvements that will have a bigger impact on product quality. And the last one is around partnering with the MDIC and FDA to improve as part of the benefits. Again, I have a slide on just a little bit more information about the benefits that you'll see there potentially. And the last one is cost should not be an option or a deterrent from applying, because the cost for the CMMI appraisal and the residual risk tool assessment is covered by MDIC. So now, hearing all that, if you're thinking, hey, I might want to apply for the program, you're probably asking, what would a pilot site be expected? What would be the expectations of that pilot site? The first would be that the pilot site would be responsible for the creation of an action plan. And this must include the compliance gaps, which have to be addressed. And then the residual risk tool input to help prioritize the CMMI appraisal opportunities to have the largest impact on product quality, as well as the site must engage in quarterly checkpoints with CMMI, where they'll report out on their action plan status, which will be red, yellow, or green. Are they on plan? Are they late? That kind of thing, as well as the performance metrics will be provided to FDA. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but there's an expectation of collaboration and transparency during the full engagement of the pilot study, very similar to VIP. And if you are thinking about enrolling, this is a small encouragement to do it sooner rather than later, as there will only be 9 total sites included in the pilot study. So to give you a little bit more information about those 9 sites, those that are eligible of the 9 sites, we will be giving preference for 2 or more sites that are self-identifying. They don't have a compliance action, but they have self-identified areas where they want to strengthen their compliance. We have 2 or more sites with 483s, but no compliance action. And we're looking for 2 or more sites with a warning letter. And so the status of those that have applied to date, we have 6 sites that have applied, 2 have enrolled, they've been accepted into the program, 2 are in review, and 2 have been declined. So each site is reviewed to ensure it meets the enrollment criteria. Now I want to hand it over to Bleda Vinici, the Case for Quality team lead at FDA, to share the FDA's perspective.
Thank you, Catherine. FDA's participation in the ASC pilot is an example of agencies' continued efforts to ensure patients and providers have access to safe and effective, high-quality medical devices. As mentioned, the pilot leverages successful elements of the Case for Quality VIP pilot with a goal to promote continuous improvement and organizational excellence, as well as get manufacturers in a state of compliance and structure their systems for continuous improvement. The opportunity to work with CMMI and Manufacturing Control, Inc. provides an opportunity for an organization to focus their efforts on continuous improvement, as well as leverage those inputs as they're defining the future action that their organization will take. Throughout the pilot, we've heard feedback from industry participants that there is a fear of agencies' potential lack of commitment. As such, the agency leaders really wanted to showcase their commitment to this pilot study. Dr. Shuren has said CDRH continues to collaboratively develop programs to ensure patients and providers have access to safe, effective, and high-quality medical devices. The Accelerate Sustainability Capability Pilot Study is an example of one of these collaborations to develop new approaches to improve safety and quality while enabling a path for manufacturer success. ASC builds on lessons learned from the Case for Quality VIP pilot, and CDRH is committed and will engage with participating manufacturers to test out the use of the quality system maturity and residual risk assessment tools to help focus their efforts to achieve systemic quality and compliance improvements. In addition, the Associate Commissioner for Regulatory Affairs, Dr. Judith McKean, has stated that as major technical and scientific advancements have challenged existing regulatory paradigms and impact emerging manufacturing technologies, other factors too are evidencing the critical need to shift from compliance-based to quality-centric paradigms for regulatory oversight. The unprecedented pace of global manufacturing, an increased desire to use real-world data, and appeals to foster closer engagements among regulatory agencies, regulated industry, and patients are clear indicators that we must envision our future as relying upon risk-informed quality-related standards as the foremost approaches for evaluating the safety, performance, and quality of medical devices. In the Office of Regulatory Affairs, we are committed to the goal of optimizing our inspectional approaches to medical device manufacturing in order to enhance product quality. And one way we intend to advance this goal is through our support for the Accelerate Sustainable Capability pilot study. As you can see, there is full commitment and engagement from the agency, both from ORA as well as CDRH. Both CDRH members as well as ORA members are part of the working group, and again have really designed this pilot or provided feedback in designing this pilot thoroughly, which we believe that will help organizations that are currently struggling not only meet the regulatory compliance, but also exceed them. And that is the goal of this pilot study. Catherine, I'm going to turn it back to you for the industry perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Bleda. I also wanted to share an industry perspective that came from a number of our working group members from industry, but we do believe that the themes that we're going to share here will resonate with you within industry if you are considering applying for the pilot study. So we do believe that all of these themes will be impactful to the relationship and partnership between FDA and industry. And the first theme I wanted to talk about was the one around collaboration and transparency. So we do believe that the pilot study will encourage and support both collaboration and transparency between the agency and between industry. And in contrast to more traditional approaches where the communication between the agency occurs within the construct of an inspection and feedback occurs in the form of agency 483s, warning letters, or untitled letters, or the similar things like that, we believe that this provides an opportunity for a different form of collaboration and transparency. So the second theme really is around expectations and speed. So the ability to have everyone engaged and working together allows sites to better create a roadmap or an action plan to achieve substantial compliance. And we do believe that this collaboration will help them with the action plan, but we do believe that it's going to help in the speed of closure of compliance actions that have been identified. And the clear roadmap will also potentially help an organization plan or effectively manage their resources as they work on their remediation plans. So the third theme is around alignment, and specifically between the industry and FDA. So there's multiple touch points, as I presented earlier, within the pilot study, and each one of these is an opportunity to ensure ongoing alignment between industry and your site and the FDA. So the fourth theme is around the fact that, as we talked about earlier, with the fact that there's so many similarities with the VIP program, we really do have these elements that are based on a proven model that has been effective. So for instance, the pilot study is based on the CMMI appraisal, where we've already shown that it demonstrates the ability to support a site as they move towards organizational excellence. It's been some model that's been used for decades, and it has been very effective at identifying improvements. A quote that I'd like to share comes from one of our working group members, this Raymond Seda, who's a Senior Director of Quality and Compliance at Medtronic. And he said, I quote, "The CMMI model has been a foundational tool to help pinpoint areas of opportunity and has allowed us to view our quality system from a different perspective. More importantly, it has been instrumental for us in defining year-over-year continuous improvement plans." So the final theme I wanted to share was that around shared objectives. So the pilot study itself acknowledges the shared objectives between FDA and industry, and mainly that the pilot study itself was built upon the premise that both the FDA and industry have patient safety as their primary guiding principle. So the pilot study can be used to help shape the work towards achieving the common goal of increased product quality. So with that, I wanted to hand it over to Holly Sepinen, who's a quality director at Zimmer Biomet, to share her experiences with us.
Thank you, Catherine. My name is Holly Sepinen. I'm a quality director at Zimmer Biomet, and I have been participating on the MDIC-led working group for this ASC pilot. I'm speaking today to provide an industry perspective to those of you that may be considering entering the pilot, but haven't done so due to concerns or reservations you're having. We recently faced that same decision and were able to overcome those hesitations. So like many of your companies, we have sites participating in Case for Quality VIP program. Our experience, like that of other industry participants, has been overwhelmingly positive. Individuals have felt excited and motivated. They described that it felt like a real value-added partnership. So after having such a positive experience there, why would we then hesitate to participate in the ASC pilot, which is based on those same building blocks of VIP? Well, I wanted to share some of our specific hesitations and uncertainties and how we overcame them. I also just want to stop there and point out that we reached out directly to the FDA Case for Quality group to share and discuss our concerns, and that really made a big difference for us. So I encourage you to do the same if you do need some additional assurances. So our first concern, we thought, we're toward the end of our multi-year journey here. We consider our remediation journey status as rounding third base and heading toward home with a clear path on what's necessary to reach compliance and sustainable compliance. So will the pilot team really see value in our participation if we didn't just recently identify these issues? And will we really see any value? So we had to think, the promise of this ASC program is not on achieving compliance, but on sustaining compliance and continuously improving that compliance. So because of that, we were assured that no matter where a site is in their journey, the pilot team is still likely to see value in the participation from your site. And we also needed to acknowledge more of that sustaining benefit of the pilot. So second, as any of you can attest that have embarked upon a significant remediation effort, especially a multi-year effort, that takes substantial investment and focus and can really take a toll on people. And can we really ask those people now to take on one more program, one more initiative? So we took a close look at what would it really take for us to participate, and how could we do that in the least disruptive but still gain the benefits. There are two areas that we looked at in terms of what would it take. It was the compliance dossier, and then more substantially, the residual risk assessment and action plan. And it was the residual risk assessment that gave us quite a bit of pause. It is both the most exciting part or piece of the program to really see how our medical device reporting data is perceived from the outside, but also the piece potentially requiring the most investment of resources to really understand. So we were assured and ultimately convinced that the company is really in the driver's seat in analyzing that data and determining what actions we want to pursue as a result. So we, like you, are entirely committed to the highest standards of patient safety and quality. And we had asked ourselves, is the investment in the program likely to pay off? And in the end, we did miss an opportunity to give ourselves the utmost advantage in ensuring our improvements would be long lasting and continuous. So thank you. So we, like you, are committed to the highest standards of patient safety and quality. And we had to ask ourselves, is the investment in this program likely to pay off? In the end, we didn't want to miss this opportunity to give ourselves the utmost advantage in ensuring our improvements would be long lasting and continuous. So thanks, Catherine, for the opportunity to give this perspective.
You're very welcome. We were glad you were able to present. So for those of you who are interested, this is the last part of our session. So for those of you who are interested in the pilot study, here are a few ways that you can engage in the program. You could learn more on the MDIC and FDA websites, which I mentioned at the start of the presentation, where there's a webinar with deeper information, the detailed playbook, as well as the frequently asked questions. If you still have questions or you want to reach out and, like Holly mentioned, maybe address some of the concerns your site may have, you can ask questions by reaching out to the MDIC Case for Quality Program Manager, Desiree Steele, and her contact information is right here. Or you can do as Holly did and contact the Case for Quality team at FDA directly. I know that they would be happy to answer your questions. And I've got the 2 websites that you might need to take a look at to better understand here, the MDIC and the FDA website, as well as the last thing you can do to engage would be to apply to the pilot study once your questions are answered. And if you are interested in applying, you can go to the MDIC website, submit your online application, and it's a relatively simple application, and you'll be notified of your pilot status in less than 2 weeks. So again, like we mentioned earlier, don't wait to apply if you're interested, because participation is limited to the 9 sites. So if we do get the 2 in review approved, we've got 5 slots left. So we want to thank you for your interest in the pilot study and let you know that we're here to support you and to answer any questions you may have. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. That was another informative panel discussion. Today's programming has been very helpful on highlighting advanced manufacturing, computer software assurance, and the Accelerate Sustainable Capability pilot study. On behalf of myself and MDIC, we would like to thank our presenters as well as our attendees for joining the forum. Please note the recordings from both days will be available on the MDIC website in the coming weeks. And on that note, thank you again, and we hope that you have a wonderful day. You may use the Q&A chat box on your Zoom toolbar to pose any questions to the panelists.
Hi, this is Alan, the Program Director for Case for Quality. I'd like to thank again all the panelists for the outstanding presentations. And while we wait for any questions that might come into the Q&A box, I thought I'd take a brief moment to allow the panelists to share any final thoughts they might have on the topics that were presented today. Because we'll have a moment here while questions come in.
Yeah, hi, Alan, it's Robbie.
Hi, Robbie.
Hi. I know there was a question or a suggestion on the chat, to discuss how advanced manufacturing and risk management interplay in this digital environment. And I just wanted to comment that, this is an emerging area, and we can, I think, develop something here. But I think fundamentally, there is some advantage to looking at this from the perspective of both systematic and random risks, and to the extent that we can leverage technology in the digital twin and digital thread, to get a better handle on either one of those, that would help us with the risk estimation and the likelihood of harm and severity. There's the same sort of thought on the manufacturing side, also with regard to risk controls, within manufacturing and the specific processes that are then amenable to data harnessing on the manufacturing side. And then, you know, the tie back into risk controls from an implementation perspective, be it in design or in manufacturing, can actually get probably better enabled through the use of the digital technology and the digital thread harnessing the data. Using an IoT kind of approach, I think getting data from the systems dynamically so that we can have a more real-time picture of the updates to the risk files. I just wanted to throw that out as because I know that question came up. It's a really good question that I think we should think more about. And I just want to throw out some conceptual ideas around that.
Oh, absolutely, Robbie. Thank you for that too. It's very helpful perspective and a lot of opportunity. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I will pose a question that came in through chat in addition to questions that are coming into the Q&A box. A question that came into chat was, do we have a date for the release of the computer software assurance guidance? So I don't know if we have an idea of when we might expect the industry to see that.
Hi, this is Cisco. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I think from our standpoint, it is on our A list. It's been on there over the past year. I think the goal is to get it out and the commitment from the agencies to get it out as soon as possible. But it really is going to be in queue and dependent on a lot of the work that's being done now with regards to, you know, the emergency use authorizations and things that are being dealt with, used to deal with the pandemic. So there is no clear, clean, even anticipated date because there's just a lot of additional emergency stuff in its queue.
Right. Thank you for that, Cisco. And if you want to jump in on the tail of my comment, please feel free. You know, related to computer software assurance, you know, MDIC will be collaborating with the folks and organizations that you heard in our presentation here today on presenting educational material and case studies related to methods and benefits of computer software assurance. So we will see some of that material roll out here in the first part of next year in an effort to promulgate that throughout the industry as best as possible.
Let me actually also, if I've got a chance here, to tackle a couple other ones that have come in. I think one of the ones was, will CSA be applied to device software in addition to manufacturing software? I think to that end, there's already a lot of additional work that the agency is doing with regards to the device software or software as a device. And that is ongoing. So with CSA, we're really just targeting the manufacturing activities, but we are leveraging a lot of what I think is already even considered or allowed within those spaces. So just stay tuned because there is work within the Digital Health Center of Excellence coming, and you know the engagements and efforts that the agency's been really trying to do with regards to the pre-certification program to help address the questions in that area. I think one of the other questions that we got was the merits of digital tech not are clear, but is CFQ advocating the use of digital tech? And what about many device makers for whom advanced digital tech may be too complex? So I think we are advocating where it makes sense, right, to really drive and move and implement digital technology or the digital capability. It doesn't mean that every place and every product, every type of manufacturing requires it, and it is an absolute must. We are just making this option this additional option available for when the organization or the process really dictates that it needs it or it's ready for it. So don't feel like this is something that we are mandating and it's not part of what we are trying to you know drive as a regulatory requirement. It's really another side of the same coin, and it's there to be used as an additional tool. What we do want to do is try to make and implement and facilitate the implementation and adoption of that technology when it's reasonable, when it's feasible. Let's see, I think we got another question on CSA. Let's see, the question states that the amount of flexibility in testing and strategy and documentation will certainly help streamline testing execution. How have teams implemented frameworks to allow expedient review and determination of testing strategy so that teams can efficiently get started and not spin their wheels in determining the approach? And I think, I don't know if by chance, Ken or Jason are still on and available in the panel, but it might make more sense for one of them to share their experiences or the experience they've got right from their standpoint.
So, hey, this is Ken. Trying to read that question to understand it. We have standardized templates that we use for our test plan. We have a standard methodology for test design. We tend to use free plane for mind mapping. As a consequence, we get not in determining the approach. So the approach is tricky because every system is going to be different. So we have standard templates to standardize our processes. We have a standard methodology for looking at test design. So we break it out to user UI features for the presentation, for the integrations, for all sorts of things like that. So we're able to standardize that. We have a standard life cycle such that we go through the rituals a certain way. We have standard assessments when we look for automation. Is there, we just, for determining whether we're going to automate, regression automate, is there value? How much will we use this? When we automate prospectively, as we're actually validating the system, how many times can we reuse that automation as we implement it? So we have standard assessments and standard templates. I guess where I'm a little hung up on the approach will vary slightly for every system.
Hey, Ken, this is Jason. I'll just add to what you shared for everyone out there. We have a number of different examples around different types of software solutions where we've applied different types of risk assessment, test assurance frameworks and strategies. And, certainly as Alan alluded to, we want to make sure that MDIC has all of those examples and can share that with the community. And again, this is an iterative process. And if manufacturers out there have more examples and more frameworks, we really encourage you to share it so others can benefit. But we'll be sharing that with Alan and MDIC.
So just to tackle the question here on the discussion of CSA, CSV complementary to, but distinct from CFQ. It is a great question because it's very much something that originated, and the work to try to tackle that activity actually originated during our CFQ efforts and our CFQ engagements. It is a broader, more foundational piece. So to your point, it is a complementary effort. It's not something that is a requirement from a CFQ standpoint, but it is broadly associated. It does support the ability to move forward or to build capability or capacity within an organization. And it's very much associated with each organization's journey and where they are in the implementation of their processes. They are just kind of being viewed, and the opportunity to bring these two things together as a support or tool is, I think, what we're trying to really encourage and drive here.
Doesn't appear like there's any more questions.
Any more questions? Okay. Do any of the panelists have anything that they want to share? Any additional comments to close out the forum?
I know there was a question, and maybe it's for Alan or Cisco, but there was a question earlier on about how do we get more engaged in the advanced manufacturing activities from someone? Maybe it was Catherine.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm glad that you brought that
yes.
point up, Rob, because I think with regards to the work that's being done with advanced manufacturing, MDIC is doing a lot to really drive and coordinate some of that effort. So if people want to be engaged and involved, it is an effort that is starting up. There is still a lot to be done and defined there. I don't know, and Alan can speak to it afterwards. I'm sure it's okay to reach out to either MDIC themselves, or if you need to, write to the Case for Quality team on our side at caseforquality@fda.hhs.gov, and we will make the right connections.
Absolutely. And thank you, Robbie and Cisco, for that prompt. Yes, please, for anyone that is interested in learning more about or getting involved in the advanced manufacturing effort, please do reach out directly to me at Baumel, Baumel, at mdic.org. You can find my information on the MDIC website or the email Cisco just gave, if that's easier for you. And we'll absolutely connect with you and look at how you could be involved or learn more about advanced manufacturing. We're very excited about that program and what it can do for the industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan and Cisco.
Hi, Alan. This is Blita Bonici. We did receive a question earlier on the ASC pilot and how the residual risk assessment is being utilized. So I thought I'd speak to that here as well as I responded in the chat. So the residual risk assessment is being utilized as an additional input to the participants' action plan to help focus their efforts on remediation as well as the continuous improvement. That assessment really includes more data and it compares the indication of the overall residual risk for a specific device against the risk that is typically inherited by that device. Is providing an overview of how the MAUDE data is looking to from the outside, opportunity to embed and consideration the some of the failure modes identified, but also looking at the gaps and observations identified by the CMMI appraisal, as well as during an or an audit, some of those observational non-conformances. And so taking all those inputs, that's an action plan to move forward, not only getting to a state of compliance, but also driving the continuous improvement efforts even beyond that compliance threshold.
Thank you, Blada. An outstanding explanation of how we're using the residual risk assessment. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we thank you again for attending. Hopefully you got to enjoy both days of the programming of the forum. And as mentioned in the closing remarks, the recordings will be available on the MDIC website in the coming days. Thank you.
Thanks, Desiree. Bye.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you, panelists.
Yes, thank you, panelists and attendees
Thanks,
too.
Alan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
MDIC.
Thank you.